All right, hey everyone. Welcome to another GoDaddy Pro meetup with WordCamp Europe happening just a couple of weeks ago. It's been a few weeks since we've had one of these, but we're back. My name is Marcus Burnett, and today with me I have three guests to chat about doing what they love, specifically within the WordPress world. First, I have Drew Wilde, Director of Product Management at GoDaddy. How are you doing today, Drew?
Doing very well. Thank you, Marcus.
Awesome. And why don't you let people know where you're coming from?
I'm coming from Utah. That's where I'm
From
based out of.
Utah.
Grew up in California, transplanted to Utah.
Okay. Sounds good. Also with us is Sam Smith, full stack engineer at GoDaddy. Where are you and how are you doing today, Sam?
Doing well. Glad to be here. And I'm actually coming from Honolulu on Oahu in Hawaii, and originated from Orlando, Florida.
Inside your basket in Hawaii.
Yes.
Coming
Trust me, you don't
from
want
your
to see what's
basket.
behind it.
Fair enough. And finally, we have Jessica Fowler working with the team that I came from at Skyverge as a technical account manager at GoDaddy. How are you today, Jessica?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for asking.
And where are you coming from again?
I live in Phoenix, Arizona area.
Phoenix. Awesome. Yeah, I know that, Sam, you're doing stuff with the Skyverge team too. It's kind of hard to tell, but I'm wearing my Skyverge shirt today because I was also a
Nice.
technical account manager on the Skyverge team until, I don't know, maybe about a year ago. So I know those folks well. Um, we'll get a bit more into what each of you does in just a moment, but first, just a couple of quick notes before we get started. For those of you hanging out with us today, feel free to leave any questions that you might have for us in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat as we go along here on the platform, and as questions roll in, I'll be sure to kind of interject those. Also, this is being recorded, so if you have to leave early or if you want to share this with the rest of your team, afterwards, a link will be sent out to the email that you used to register with the replay for this. So that will be available as well. With that, our main goal today is to kind of dive into your professional stories, how you got into WordPress and how that's brought you to doing what you do today. I think we'll start with Drew and then kind of work our way around. So, Drew, why don't you tell us a little bit? How did you get started with, I guess, the web and then ultimately WordPress?
Yeah, so I was going to school out here in Utah, and I needed a job to help support my education. And there was a hosting company hiring that I had a couple friends working at. It was Bluehost. And so I got a job on the support team at Bluehost, and that's where I was introduced to the open web. I was introduced to hosting, cPanel, all of these kind of great terms. And along that path, more and more and more, the CMS of choice was WordPress. And as I evolved in my career at Bluehost from support and billing to sales into marketing and eventually into product, we put our time at Bluehost focusing on novice WordPress users. And when I had the opportunity to come on board at GoDaddy, helping run the managed WordPress hosting product, I really thought that this was my opportunity to be a part of a large team trying to do WordPress, try to win at WordPress at scale. And so, but around 2016 is when I really started to get involved in the WordPress community, started to go to events, started to participate as a contributor, not on the code side. I'm not as as adept over there, but I'm part of the support and I contribute on the hosting, and I love to participate in the events. WordCamp specifically, for years and years, I was going to 4 to 6 a year until recent events, and now I'm hoping to get back out to WordCamp US later this year and see some old friends.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like we have quite the array of different WordPress involvement, different skill sets here on this particular one. So I'm excited to hear everyone's sort of different route in and stuff. You said you were going to school in Utah when you joined Bluehost in support. How much were you going to school for web, or was that just kind of something that seemed interesting to you and decided to take that position?
That's a great question. At the time, I was interested in a business degree, but man, all my humanities classes, all my English classes, my literature classes were the most interesting to me. So I ended up being an English major for my undergrad, which
Okay.
really helped me kind of think creatively, think critically in a way that helped my career progress to a point. I ended up getting an MBA later on, and that has helped me in my product management career. And I thought I
Mm-hmm.
would be a project manager for a long time. But once I kind of got involved in creating products for users in a hosting space, I really found a passion for helping people be successful online. And for me, being a part of more of an open web advocate and being a part of a couple of, like CMS type summits at Google and other things, I just was really passionate about making sure the open web was a cool and fun place. And WordPress is the consumer CMS, in my opinion, in order to drive that democratizing the web methodology.
Yeah, very cool. Out of curiosity, how did you come across that support position? If you weren't necessarily doing web stuff, you were
Yeah,
just like, give
I
me any job, literally any job that's open.
it was at Bluehost. It was, I joined pretty early on Bluehost. Bluehost before it was Endurance. Before it was now it is Newfold.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pretty family kind of company. Kind of started up there, and so I ended up from the like one of the 41st employees. I was like, oh, their sister got hired, and then their brother got hired, and that brother was my best friend in high school, and I needed a job, and he said, come work for me. And that's how I got involved.
They originate out of Utah then?
They did, yeah.
Okay,
They still have a Bluehost still has a strong presence in Utah from a data center point of view.
gotcha. That's good to know.
Mhm.
How about you, Sam? Can you tell us where your web world started, or how you got there and into WordPress and all of that?
Yeah, for sure. So for 8 years, I was a firefighter paramedic. Did that kind of like right out of high school. Went to tech school, got involved with firefighting, and then eventually into the medical side of it with the EMT and paramedic. And then as I was kind of getting into a kind of like a crossroads point in my career where it was either promote and become a lieutenant, which didn't really interest me too much, or kind of stay in the medical field and maybe go the nursing route or something like that. That didn't really appeal to me either. I was kind of getting to a point where I was like 27, 28, starting to sustain, just typical injuries. And then just kind of looking at it and saying like, maybe this isn't super sustainable. At the same time, I was kind of playing around with the website stuff because I was interested in doing something as a side gig. As firemen, we worked for either 24, 48, sometimes 72 or more hours. And so I needed kind of something that would just fit the bill when I got the time. And it was good for that period because I just kind of like, Googled how do you make a website? Then you go to YouTube, you figure out all the stuff. You see WordPress in the bottom, you're like, what the heck is WordPress? You click on that, and then you're down a rabbit hole. But yeah, I started getting involved with meetups because I got to the point where I could not really do as much just learning by myself, but I needed like some outside help. So very nervously started going to these meetups, not knowing anybody, sharing my story, then eventually got asked to start speaking, then got to do the keynote in 2017 for Orlando, which opened up a whole bunch of doors. At that point, I was still kind of part-timing with the whole WordPress developer thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not realizing that my CEO for the company that I was about to get hired for was in the audience. His name is Matt Cromwell. He's one of the co-founders of Give.
Right.
Got to work at Give for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I was on the support side, which was perfect because, the company was still small enough to where we had a support team of like 4 or so people. So we got to get our hands really dirty with customer sites. I got to learn a ton about WordPress from going from that part-time to full-time mentality, which that's a huge shift in learning. And then kind of went out on my own, did the freelance thing for about a year, then went to an agency, did a year there, kind of as a junior developer. And then a year ago, got hired on with GoDaddy on the Skyverge Managed WooCommerce team. So I build a bunch of products for the WooCommerce side of things. So that's kind of what's led me to today.
That's awesome. I love that story. I'm curious. You said, you had those firefighter hours, right? Where you're on days, off days, and figuring out what you can do on those off days. What prompted you to pursue web? Was it somebody that was like, hey, I think you should look at this? Was it you needed a website for something? What
No,
made you look in that direction versus
it
anything
was
else?
honestly, I wish that it was more romantic than this, but it was like I just jumped online and was like, who makes a lot of money? And it was like, oh, web developers make a lot of money. And then it's like, who can work from anywhere, like remotely. Oh, web developers can work from anywhere remotely. And then it was like, up until that point, it was like, on paper, this sounds great. And then once I started doing tutorials and actually writing code and seeing it come to life on the page, then it turned into like, oh, I'm also super passionate about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. It's definitely like that Venn diagram. This whole thing is about talking about doing what you love, and you get these check boxes or like the Venn diagram of like what overlaps where, and you're like, okay, it makes decent money. That's great. Everyone wants that, but can work from home from anywhere and can work in any location. Websites are needed all over the place, and so you start checking those boxes. That's interesting that you're like, I just need something to fill my time. What can I do that checks all these boxes that'll allow me to do that and continue being a firefighter, at least for the foreseeable future? That's cool. I love that story, and that you ended up at the with the Skyverge crew. I have obviously a soft spot in my heart there, because that's where I started and got acquired by GoDaddy with the Skyverge crew and stuff. So, speaking of which, Jessica, we're going to move over to you. You're even closer to what I was doing at Skyverge on the support team there. But how did you end up there? How did you end up in the Web and WordPress world and ultimately with the Skyverge team?
Yeah, so with me, I actually used to work in the cellular industry, doing tech support there, helping out with 5G, even kind of toward the end. But one of the benefits was a very generous $8,000 a year toward my college tuition. And it was like a very big goal for me to get my bachelor's. So I had to choose between IT and business, and business did not sound interesting to me at all. But on the IT side, it allowed me to kind of figure out what my focus was. Like, I had to take my general ed classes. And once I took my first programming class, I was like, this is it. This is what I need to do with my life. I was also going through a lot of center closures. So that's kind of how I ended up living in Arizona instead of the Midwest. So I'm very thankful that I was able to continue my career there, finish college. And then how I specifically got into WordPress was, as you know, like, college does not teach you everything that you need to know about programming and building websites. Like, I have all the foundational knowledge, but I don't know how to piece it together. So I was looking for meetups, and I actually went to a Drupal meetup one time, and they canceled all of the following Drupal meetups. That was not going to be a thing anymore. So I ended up going to a WordPress meetup, and it was hosted at Bluehost Endurance. And from there, I talked to someone about like what kind of positions that can I start off with, because I was having trouble finding only unpaid internships. I'm too old for unpaid internships. I have rent, I have bills. I cannot do an unpaid internship. So that's kind of how I started off in WP Live, which was perfect because I had that call center experience, but now I was teaching WordPress to people. And I ended up loving doing that. I found that, you kind of have to stay like mobile whenever you're at the beginning of your career with WordPress. So I ended up, kind of learning everything I thought I could know from WP Live and helping people. And I wanted to take the next step. And luckily that I ended up going to GoDaddy for hosting, and I learned a ton about hosting and WordPress there. And then from there, I worked for a small boutique company, and I mainly did tech support tickets, like making changes after these custom sites were built, and kind of figuring out like little small issues. They ended up not having enough work for me in the end, so that's how I ended up back at GoDaddy with Skyverge. That experience between knowing the hosting side, understanding the more custom side of WordPress with the previous job at the boutique company, kind of made it a perfect fit for me with this role. And it pretty much checks off all of the things that I eventually wanted to do. Is I love the technical side of solving tickets and you know everything with that, but also WordPress, you can be extremely creative with it, so it's kind of a perfect fit for me.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of what I do with GoDaddy Pro is like community focused and stuff. So I love hearing from all three of you just how much like being in the community, going to these meetups and learning from people and being welcomed in and asked to speak and all of that stuff has like really jump started a lot of, a lot of those careers and everything. So I love to hear that. I'll quickly just toss mine in, just to kind of give a little bit of context of my background too. I started doing graphic design stuff way back in high school, late 90s ish, and wanted to pursue that as my career long term, doing design stuff. And my parent, I went to college for graphic design, and my parents were like, well, what are you going to do with this? At that time, late 90s, nobody really knew where this was going. Are there graphic design careers? Is that a real thing? And so I was like, well, I need to find a way to share the stuff that I've been doing with them and with anybody else who asks me what it is that I'm doing and where I'm going with my life. So I decided to learn how to put that stuff online. So at that time, there wasn't all like, Facebook, MySpace, and all that stuff yet where you could just post things. So you had to figure out how to publish things online yourself. So learned how to build sites through Notepad and eventually Dreamweaver, building things with Table and adding all those graphics in and everything else. And at some point got to a place, I actually switched from graphic design to web design because I really loved it so much in college. And after I was done there, I started working at an agency here in Orlando, building websites for clients. And we did that for many years before we decided, we need to look into this content management system thing everyone's talking about, let clients be able to, update their own websites. Of course, we know how some of that goes now, but nonetheless, it's still easier for us to update those websites. So let's figure out what content management system we're going to do. And we actually ultimately ended up using Drupal for a long time. We looked at WordPress, and back at that time, it was still kind of that blogging platform that everyone kind of sort of makes fun of the early WordPress for, right? Oh, it's just for blogs. And it was still at that time. There wasn't custom post types and all that stuff yet. So we decided to go with Drupal, and we used Drupal for a long time. And at some point, we decided that the future of Drupal was kind of headed in a different direction than the future of our agency. They were going a bit bigger. We were focused on smaller boutique clients and stuff. And so we started to take a look at the landscape again and looked at WordPress and realized that that was going to work exactly the way we needed it to for our clients, and adopted that and started working on sites with WordPress. And so did that for a long time. And actually, it's just kind of a funny part of the story, even though I'm so like part of the community now, and a lot of the stuff that I do is community focused. I used WordPress for many years before even going to a meetup or being a part of the community. So lots of years of, I think, started in like 2015 or so. And then one of the first WordPress things that I went to was WordCamp Orlando, that sounds like Sam and Drew were both at that time. And then I think I maybe went to one other one, and then of course COVID hit and shut everything down. And so for a long time, the community part was, this Zoom calls and seeing each other on video and stuff, which is great and has definitely allowed me to keep forming those bonds with people. And thankfully I was able to go to WordCamp Europe and meet some people online, in person a couple of weeks ago, and that was amazing. And I love that that's starting to open back up and be a reality. So anyways, I worked at the agency for a long time. I left there at the end of 2019, started at SkyVerge at the beginning of 2020, and then we were acquired in October of 2020 by GoDaddy. And so continued to work in support there, doing some marketing things for SkyVerge as well. And then ultimately ended up moving over to the GoDaddy Pro team at the end of last year, 2021, somewhere towards the end of last year. And have been part of the GoDaddy Pro team since then. That was a lot longer than I expected to make it, but there's a little bit of background there. How I ended up from, graphic design all the way through WordPress and into doing community stuff with WordPress here.
I liked it, Marcus. I liked it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I was on a different podcast yesterday or Monday, and we kind of did the same spiel, and I was trying to make it shorter, and I think I made it longer. And that's just how it goes sometimes. But I appreciate you sitting through it. I have a few other questions, and we can just kind of roll into some of those. Doesn't matter what order you guys want to go, whoever wants to take it. But the question I have here is, what is it about WordPress that you think sets it apart from other web platforms? And I kind of have my thoughts on this, but I want to hear from you why you all kind of talked about it a little bit, but why you chose WordPress over anything else.
For me, there's I like the ideological democratized publishing on the web. That's something that I'm passionate about. I want people to feel like when they have a WordPress site and that's, we'll call it self-hosted, obviously, a lot of time hosting partners like GoDaddy, that heavy lifting there, but the idea that you own your content and that it's a little bit of your DNA in there, I think is really important for the open web. Now, is the open web perfect? No, it has it's got some issues, and we all kind of want to work together to solve some of those. But I truly believe in its ability and its power to make the world a better place.
That's awesome. What about you, Jessica?
For me, I would say it's the community. There's nothing like it with web platforms at all. It kind of was exactly what helped me get into this career, and just being able to, just share knowledge that is so different from the previous career I came from, where it was highly competitive. You have to sign a million non-compete agreements. That you just would not expect T-Mobile and Verizon to share information to make a better network. So it was very much a culture shock to me that GoDaddy is working with Endurance, and everybody's contributing to this tool that they use to make it better. And even the past couple of years that I've been working with WordPress, it has gotten so much better because of that collaborative community environment that they've created.
Great answer, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Love
100%.
that.
Sam, how about you?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, both Drew and Jessica, I definitely agree with, both of the things, and, lean heavily onto the community side of it, because honestly, because I was somebody who I had a library card to get started. Had I not had the community to be there to back me up, to give me, sort of that push behind, to where it's just I would hit a wall, I'd have to turn around and look at the, people that had done this already. And, they just kind of kept pushing me forward. I probably wouldn't have, it may have just stayed a hobby. It may not have been something that could have been able to take me into a new career, something where I feel extremely fulfilled in. And I would also kind of add, another thing that I like about it is, the accessibility of it. The fact that you can jump on YouTube, get started. You have most of the hosting companies, you can hit a button and they'll install it for you, and you're running on a WordPress site. And honestly, like, probably the most non-fun part is the market share. There's a lot of money around it, and when there's a lot of money and people, then there's a lot of resources, and it's something that can have some momentum to continue getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all those things. For me, what's funny is I think the original answer, like when we adopted WordPress, was that it was easier than Drupal. Like we had come from Drupal. Drupal had such a steep learning curve that when we were like, let's see what else is out there, what we can do, we jumped onto WordPress and we're like, this is so much easier to write code for, to develop with, and there's so many tools and plugins and stuff. And as I've started to be part of more of the community, I think that that's probably even overtaken that. Like I said, I worked with it for a while before even becoming part of the community. But like Jessica said, there's so many companies working together where you're like, aren't you competitors? Well, I mean, yeah, but we're all trying to push this WordPress thing forward because we're all relying on this to, to fuel our products and to create great things for customers. And like we're all, yes, we're doing that from different angles and we have different things to offer in some of those spaces, but like to be able to reach out to somebody from a different company who's technically a competitor and be like, hey, I'm running into this, do you have any words of advice or whatever? Just like, oh, we're all part of the same WordPress community, of course, let me help you with that, right? The WordPress community to me just feels so inviting and so open and welcoming that it doesn't matter doesn't matter who you work for or what you do. Like we're all still part of this larger community working on this thing together, and that's evidenced in the number of like teams that work on WordPress and volunteers for those teams and where everyone from those teams comes from. I mean, those either sponsored or doing it because they want to push it forward. Like that's all working on this beast of a thing together to push the whole web forward. And I love that. And that, I think that kind of crosses both the democratizing publishing and the community side kind of at the same time. Let's move on to a different question that I have for each of you, and let's get a little more personal. What part of your job do you love most and why? And maybe we'll start with Sam this time. Or maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do first, and then what part of that you love the most.
Okay.
So people get an idea. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So basically what I do is I'm kind of like the one slapping the keyboard. The majority of my day is spent in a code editor. We work with product to be able to prioritize the stuff that we need to build out. And then, we'll assign it, small different pieces or epics, and then we'll tackle each one as a team as we need to. I work on a team with 3 other people, and we kind of all bump off of each other. If we're getting bogged down or not being able to do something, we'll kind of like pair programs sometimes, jump on a call. And so all of what I do is trying to like maximize the amount of time that I'm in my code editor outside of meetings, outside of answering emails and stuff like that. And honestly, I would say that's probably my favorite thing. Like as I've come here and started working in an enterprise company, I'm seeing that my speed at which I can produce good quality code is just skyrocketing. And so, I'm finding, when I fly through something that used to take me a few hours and I can knock it out in 20 minutes, like that's where I get, jump up and down joy from. I've totally accepted that I'm 100% a nerd and I nerd out on stuff like that. And that is what I measure my success on in a day.
I'm not a developer by any stretch of the imagination, but I have written some code, and it's insanely rewarding when you write code and it doesn't work like 15 times and then it finally does work. You just keep at it and it finally does what it's supposed to be doing, and you're like, yes, I finally cracked it. Stupid semicolon or something, but
well, it's like you bump back between thinking you're an idiot to I am a coding wizard, and you just like bing back and
Those
forth
are
from that.
those are the ends. There's no real middle ground there. It's either I don't know what I'm doing with my life or I'm amazing. I love that. How about you, Jessica?
Yeah, so I'm currently a technical account manager for GoDaddy in the Skyverge team. So I work with helping merchants with these skins that they created and were acquired by GoDaddy. And I would probably say my favorite part of working for them is the fact that it's completely remote. I've been looking for something that is fully remote forever. I thought I would hate remote, which funny enough, I was one of the people that were kind of forced to do it whenever the pandemic happened. And once I got everything with my household settled, like my dogs are quiet now and they understand that this is working time. Um, it just clicked for me. So that was actually one of the reasons that I left GoDaddy, was because eventually we'd have to come back into the office and I wanted a permanently remote company. So I worked for a company remote, but it was stuck to Phoenix. And now I'm on this team where it's just remote forever. And it's like a little bit of stress of that is lifted off of me. So I'm very happy about that, because if I want to go to, I have family all over the country. So if I want to go to Alabama to see my family, I can. Not so many like remote work options there, like the places that I could rent an office, but then, I could easily move back to the Midwest if I wanted to and save some money, because the cost of living increase here is insane.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely one of those, like Sam was talking about, two checkboxes, right? When you're looking for what it is you want to do. That was a checkbox for me too when I started at Skyverge. I was like, well, I left the agency that I was working for at the end of 2019, and it's like, well, what do I want to do now? Well, I'd like to work at home. That way I can spend more time with my wife and our daughters and be able to work from wherever, like you said, be able to travel some and be with family around the country and all that. So um, that's awesome. I'm glad that you were able to do that. One of my favorite things about working with the support team was just being that like front line with the customer and seeing like how what Sam does affects like the people using the product, and both things that they are having trouble with, but also like you do get those where people are like, oh, I love this thing, I wish it would do this, right? Sometimes it's just support, like requests of for features. Hey, I really love the way this plugin works, is there a way that I can make it do this? And then being able to bring that back to the product team and the engineering teams and be like, hey, this is what we have going on, do we think this is a good idea, how can we make this happen? And having that open dialogue with the engineers and with the product team too is really awesome to be able to. You literally are the front line. Like that's part of my job in the community, is being frontline, but the support team is just as much a front line to the community, to the customer, and finding out what's working and what's not working. And that was always awesome. How about you, Drew? Can you tell us what you do as the director of product? What was it?
Yeah.
Director of product management, and what you love most about that?
So yeah, the product management, and Sam kind of alluded to this. He says he works with product. That's
Mm-hmm.
he's talking
That's
about
you.
people like me. Yeah. And when the function of product, a product is like is a discipline now in technology about gathering and assessing requirements for market needs and writing requirements and acceptance criteria for those for teams of individuals like Sam to be able to actually produce working software that creates value. And that's like a lot of words to describe what I do. But for me, like, and somebody asked me, like, because, I've been doing product management for 6, 7 years now. And it's like, like, what is it about product management that I really like? And in my working life, I'm very much an extrovert, where I, I don't do as well by myself trying to perform my functions. But the function of a product manager is that you have to work with people in order to accomplish objectives. And they don't report to me. That's like people
Right.
like Sam. It's not a formal relationship in a lot of ways, but it's a relationship of trust and accountability as a product manager that we create with teams of engineers, and that includes designers, graphic designers, UX engineers, however you want to kind of describe that function as well, in order to really create feasible, awesome software. And for me, it's the working with people to solve problems that I really have a lot of fun doing that. And it could be really hard. And it's like, for me, it's like, if anything goes right, you thank the engineers. If anything goes wrong, you blame me. Like, that's my mentality. And that can be hard sometimes. And it's like, oh, it is what it is. But I love the work. And to do it in an industry that I'm passionate about, that's like, I'm encouraged. We have leadership at GoDaddy that is almost maniacal about us being as close to the customer as possible, voice of the customer. And like, I'm expected to provide support to customers, maybe not direct, like jumping in the account and like updating PHP versions, and if the occasion,
Please don't
warrants,
do
but
that. Stay
please
away
don't do
from
that. But like, we're expected to go out there and talk to individual customers, and the idea is that we have to have that voice of the customer in our heads. And so for me, I've always enjoyed doing that. Always enjoyed providing support, at a level of one-to-one, and then saying, okay, now as a product manager, take a step back and say, how can we do this at scale? How can we solve this problem more than one time, more than and then you just jump in a room with a team of engineers, and you start to hash it out, and it's dynamic, it's fun, it's creative, it's there's compromises there, there's a lot of dynamic nature to it. So that's what I love about my job.
That's awesome. I will admit that I didn't do this on purpose, but I love that we ended up with support, product, and engineering all together here in this session.
It's
Because
a
I feel
good
like
trifecta. Yeah.
there's like a good loop there where, support is figuring out from customers, like what are you battling? What are the issues that we can try to help fix? And then that goes to product, and product starts to think about, well, what can we do about those? Are there things that we can do? Are there things that we can't do? And then it goes to engineering to figure out how to do the things that we can do and help them to get done. And then those get pushed out, and then it goes back to support to see if those things did in fact fix the issues that people were having. So I love that there's this whole like loop here that we have going on between the three of you in being customer focused and just creating the best products that we can for customers. That's so cool. All right, let's talk about maybe some tips or advice that you all have. Maybe we'll segment it out, right, between maybe professional advice and personal advice as far as like doing the job that you love. So let's start on the professional side. What professional advice would you give people getting started and trying to figure out what they want to do with WordPress or on the web? Whoever wants to start.
Well, I would jump in and say, and this is a story that you've heard twice now already, go to a meetup. Like, that's a great way to get involved. If you're saying, I don't know what to do, for me, it's also tackle a learning curve, tackle that barrier to entry. If you are willing to take on that challenge to say, I want to either learn additional things about WordPress, or even just learn WordPress, which can be a learning curve for a lot of people coming in the door. Like, if you want to tackle it, yeah, Sam's talked about it. You go on YouTube. Jessica's talked about it. You go to a meetup. Like, it's, I those would be two top things that I would say to people.
Yeah. Any other advice from either of you, Jessica or Sam, if people are trying to figure out if either A, the web in general, or B, WordPress are what they would enjoy doing for a career long term?
Yeah, I would probably tell them, just get started, break something, do whatever you need to do. You can, go from like no code options all the way up to programming plugins. So, to figure out what you want to do. You kind of have to just get in there, get started, and break some things to start out with.
Yeah, and
Yeah, that's good.
I would kind of come up with that too. Say, you know, you almost have to have like a mental shift when you come into this career. You know, my prior career, there was no room for failure. Like, you must save the person. There's no option. Whereas here, you kind of have a shift to where you almost need to quickly get to your first error code, because then you're like, oh, you're getting something back. Like, let's Google that error code. And then you change something and then you're like, the error code changed. Now you go and Google the new error code. And so you basically like fail. I don't even want to use the term fail your way to success, but, you know, be excited with not necessarily like my code's running, but forward progression.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a softball follow-up question, because I know there's a lot of WooCommerce representation here in this group, but do y'all feel like there's room to even continue beyond WordPress and to specialize into even more niche parts of WordPress and the web, such as commerce?
Yeah, I think that I mean, obviously, you know, you bring up WooCommerce. WooCommerce is an entire beast in and of itself, you know, that needs as many people working on it as are selling on it. You know, like that. You know, like you can continually make it better. You know, and some of the WordPress communities even set up like this. It's like, oh yeah, this is this is WordPress core, and you can work on WordPress core, or you could be on the marketing team. You can sit at the marketing table. You could sit on the hosting table, and you can think about all the great ways that hosting can help benefit this community. And that's kind of where I ended up. And then even in that world of hosting WordPress, I'm in a product management career that has a different life of its own, you know, within that. So, you know, it's like I think there's great opportunities to be a part of a WordPress community, but have varying interests or degrees of, you know, like specialization.
Yeah, you actually bring up a great point. I think that I think we briefly mentioned it earlier, but 20 different teams that make up kind of the WordPress project too, and they're not all code. There's lots of different ways that you can be involved, like you said, marketing or hosting. And there's also core, but there's also like training. And I'm part of the
Yeah.
WordPress photo directory team. I mean, that's
Yeah, exactly.
as non-code as it gets. It's so much fun to see other people's photos come in, but it's a great way to contribute in a way that benefits the entire community, with having this, you know, large library of open source photos to be able to pull from for your projects and stuff. So there are all sorts of different ways to contribute that are fulfilling and help the project and help you, you know, just love what you're doing. And I'm part of my time on this team is dedicated to the WordPress photo directory. Like, I actually get paid in some part of my job to contribute and stuff. And so it's actually one of the things that I love about my job, is being able to contribute and be sponsored to do so, and help provide that to the project as well. Yep. And I have a couple in the I'll just read through a couple of things in the chat. Ken's been chatting and I've been not ignoring it, but we've been having good conversations. Let me go back. Ken mentioned earlier on that one of the things that got him first started in WordPress was that push for democratizing publishing, like you mentioned, Drew, and that's awesome. And then Ken also mentioned, yes, the community team is another one. Like I said, there are 20 teams, and I know off the top of my head maybe like 6 of them. So there's a lot of room there for different things, different ways to get involved that aren't code, depending on what it is that your specialty is. Let's see, Kaio, who also is on our GoDaddy crew, speaking as a GoDaddy employee, shadowing a different job role is always a possibility and very helpful to feel the role's environment. Yeah, so at GoDaddy we have ways that we can get involved in different teams, but I'm sure, I know that Automatic is this way too. I'm sure lots of other companies have ways for you to kind of move around within the company to try different roles to see, you know, what it is that those roles do and whether or not you would enjoy doing those things. So I guess let's switch from professional to personal then. We talked a little bit about finding a job that is remote. That might be like one personal checkbox. for choosing, whatever, for taking whatever job that you do have. What are maybe, do you have any other personal advice for folks, things that they might want to look at um, when they're trying to determine whether or not the job that they're applying for, taking, already have might be the best job that they could have? With some personal things maybe that you, maybe some personal things that you looked for in deciding on the job that you have now.
I'll say this. I kind of stumbled into this realization as I was coming into this new industry. But whenever you're kind of moving into another industry, and maybe not in a traditional sense where it's like, I went to school for this and now I'm coming out of it. I have 4 years of knowledge on this industry.
Mm-hmm.
But, say you're just jumping in, with both feet. I would say really keep an eye out for things that get you excited. The thing that pushed me through the very hard times, because there were a whole bunch of hard times getting into this career, and there are going to be hard times as I go forward.
Sure.
The thing that pushes me is passion. And I tell this because, I have a bunch of friends here. They ask you what you do. They're like, oh, I've always been interested in doing something like that. And I always provide the caveat to where it's like, I love this career and would recommend it to everybody, but I also realize that there are people that would rather claw their own eyeballs out than stare at a screen for, 12 hours a day. Whereas I find a lot of joy in it. And that's what's kind of pushed me through those, like imposter syndrome and stuff like that. So I would say, like, if you were getting into any sort of, tech industry, whether that's design, photography, creating content, regardless, keep an eye out and look for the things that really get your heart going, and then make a little note. Like, as you move from thing to thing, as you're trying to figure it out, you're like, oh, this made me the most excited when I completed it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of worth something. Should be looked into.
Yeah, that's great advice. I feel like even broadening that out a little bit to like self-awareness, like knowing what sort of things are fueling me and what sort of things are contributing to some mental burnout and stuff, and figuring out where that balance is and whether you're in a good spot for that. How about you, Drew or Jessica?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's just don't give up. It's going to be hard sometimes. So I know recently I went through some struggles where I was having major imposter syndrome. And right before the interview for Skyverge, I kind of had a mindset shift where I said, why not me? Like, I'm just as good as some of these other people. And maybe I don't get the position, but like I probably could, because I check off a good amount of these boxes here. So it was difficult because, like, previously in my job search, I was being offered like $13, $14 an hour for doing some of these things. And um, that's very hard to be offered some jobs that aren't a good fit. And, you just have to start over. So for me, it's definitely don't give up, because, you deserve a place in the industry.
Yeah. And spoiler, you did get the job, so congrats.
Yeah, spoiler.
And yeah, I mean, I can totally empathize with that. Doing what I do, being part of the community with all these amazing folks, I struggle with imposter syndrome on a daily basis. And then I just have to step back and remember that, like we talked earlier, this is the WordPress family, and all these people are like, they're rooting for you and they want you to do well and they want to provide all the things that they can to help you. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether I'm as good as them or not. Like, I know that everyone is just trying to make everyone else better and help out. So, but I can totally empathize.
And I'll add one point here, because I agree with all those. It's like you got to be willing to put yourself out there, and try new things. One thing that has been very beneficial to me, and even when I'm dealing with a lot of those same feelings, as Jessica described, is leaning on some quality mentors. Find a mentor, you know, find trusted voices in your life. They don't have to be managers. They don't have to be, in your company. It's like they can be in the community. There's a lot of people in the community that you can establish a relationship of seeking advice. And I think that those types of relationships have really helped me orient myself and my career in a direction that has made sure that I've been moving at the pace and at the trajectory that I've wanted.
Yep. That is good advice. I have one more question. It's the hardest one, I think, but that's okay. No pressure, but the question is it about finding the right company / job, or is it about making the job you have the best it can be? And I'll let you think about it for a second, and then whoever wants to start can jump in.
I'm of two minds on that. There's no doubt. Like, I
Okay.
don't think that you should stick in a toxic situation, or one that you don't feel like you're receiving any kind of personal growth. I don't think that
Fair.
would be. I wouldn't give anybody advice to, like, hey, you got to figure that out.
Yeah.
At the same time, my mindset is I'm going to get as much out of this as I put into it. And for myself, like, GoDaddy has set me up to succeed. And so for me, it's up to me to make the most of my situation. And that's, some advice that mentors have given me in the past of, making sure that you're doing your job well enough that other people are benefited in the entire ecosystem. That leads to a fulfilling job and career. But there's never going to be one right answer, I think, to that
Sure.
question, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll even say, like, you can almost kind of tell when the job isn't the right fit. It's almost like at base level type things where you're looking, you're like, man, I'm just not feeling it. Like, the work that I'm doing, or maybe the teams that I'm on. And I struggled with this a little bit, to where I was the type of person, just with how I worked, I put my head down and I make something happen. And it's very beneficial sometimes to take a step back and be like, is this bigger than me? Is putting my head down necessarily the right call here? And are there things that I can fix, can't fix? And so, yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with Drew, to where it's like, you kind of go in with both of those mentalities. You look at it and you got to finish the end of your day every day and going, did I give what I wanted to? And did I get what I needed? And I will say, of all of the jobs and the careers that I've had, GoDaddy does a really good job of, just like Drew said, giving me the tools. I feel supported. I feel like I'm treated as an adult. It's very much, these are the things and the objectives. And you should do that, not because we want you to do it, but because you want to do it. Like, you want to advance your career. You want to learn these different things. And it's a nice shift between, I better get this out because my manager was upset with me last week, and he's probably going to be more upset with me this week because something didn't happen. And no, I really want to get my head around this idea and this project. And you end up getting the project out faster, and you feel better about yourself in the meantime.
And for me, I would say never stick with like a toxic environment. It can be very hard. I came from call centers, so I was very used to sometimes, like, whenever I took escalations, customers can be quite toxic. But how is the support internally? Are you being supported? Are you going to be able to move up in this position? Have you learned everything that you have possibly? Those are kind of questions that you have to ask yourself to see if it's time to move on. And sometimes it's, better to move on even early in the position and make sure that you find something that's a good fit. And sometimes that could be like within the same company. So GoDaddy is like a huge company. And so maybe call center wasn't like a good fit for me because I had been doing it for a decade and I was very burnt out with call center work. And so that's why I stayed open-minded to coming back to GoDaddy, because I know that there's way more than just call center positions, and it turned out to be a very good idea to do that. It has been perfect, and like I can imagine, like, it was kind of scary to come back, and like it's been fantastic.
That's great. You all nailed that trick question perfectly. I agree. I mean, I think it's both. I think if you're in a job where you feel like everyone is looking for ways to point out your failures, that maybe that's not the right place, or you're feeling like you're getting just consistently burnt out over and over and over again. I mean, burnout happens to everyone. You've got to take a step back, take some vacation, whatever. But if you feel like you're getting burnt out just consistently, then it might be time to look for something else. But also, like Drew said, right, I mean, if you feel like you're in a good place where people are looking to find ways to support you, everyone's looking for you to succeed and how they can help you succeed, then it's just a matter of figuring out what it is that you can put into it to get the best out of it. So 100% agree with everything that all of you said. I was hoping that maybe we'd have a few questions from the chat, but we really didn't. I hope everyone just kind of enjoyed sitting back and listening to us. And this will be going out to our GoDaddy Pro YouTube channel and stuff, so people can continue to hear this conversation and learn how they can, be in the right place, doing the thing that they love, just like all of you. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and wrap us up. And yeah, thank you everyone for being here today. We're actually going to take a week off next week again before we have another one of these, and on June 29th, same time, same place, we'll have a more developer focused meetup. So if that's of interest to you, please make sure that you go sign up for that one and any other future events. Just go to events.godaddy.com. You can sign up there, and that's also where we'll have replays of past events in addition to on our GoDaddy Pro YouTube channel. This one should be up within the next 24 to 36 hours or so, and you'll be able to find it there. That's it for us. Thanks again, Drew, Sam, and Jessica, for joining me and telling everyone a little bit more about your journey through WordPress and your jobs now and all that stuff. I really appreciated you all being here and enjoyed listening to you tell us. Thank you.
Appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank
Thank you all for Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.
Bye.